All right. Welcome to Am I the A-hole Postpartum Edition, brought to you by a postpartum educator. So I've seen these Am I the A-hole posts prop up all the time on my Facebook feed, and occasionally they happen to cover a postpartum topic. And generally when I see them and read them, I think to myself, man, wouldn't it be so helpful if these people had some postpartum education? So many of these issues could have been avoided. So I thought, well, why not take the opportunity to go ahead and read some of these and comment on them and give you a feeling for what I might do if this was one of my clients that was coming to me with some of these issues. So with that, I have selected my first topic. We have an Am I the A-hole for setting the postpartum boundaries that I have? Now we have a bit of information that is provided by the new mom as far as her limitation, but the main thing here is that she's a 21-year-old female. She's 3 months pregnant, and she wants to have a thorough, controlled postpartum plan, which she's communicated early, which is great. Now she's communicated to her parents that she has and her spouse have decided that they want a 1-week period where after the child is born, nobody comes out as a visitor. And they also didn't want to share any pictures until after that 1-week period. So the 1-week lying in period or period without visitors is something that I'm seeing more and more these days. I think it's pretty common now for especially first-time parents to implement some sort of limitation around the number of days before they're accepting visitors. The more interesting one is definitely the picture one. And as she says in her information at the top, it sounds like maybe what happened is that she set the boundary with the picture and then got some pushback from it from her mom. And now she feels that she can't really go back or backpedal on that without feeling like she's giving her mom a win for complaining about it. She goes into some different instances on how she has concerns about the way her mom is handling the the new baby situation, where her mom wanted to give her some Harry Potter themed things, and she really doesn't want that. So it seems like it's very important that she sets boundaries early and she gets control over the situation so that grandma doesn't feel like she can kind of run over her daughter and dictate how she's going to do this. She also points out that her sister, who had a baby, was much more strict than she is, and that she feels like what her boundaries are pretty fair, but she's not sure if maybe she's being a little controlling. So that's the moral of this particular post as far as the postpartum issue that she is having. Again, she's controlling, or she's trying to share a postpartum plan. It didn't get well received by her family, and she's just trying to figure out if it was reasonable or not to have those boundaries. So let's talk about it. Again, the week one, that seems pretty common nowadays. Definitely the more interesting one is the photograph one. And if this was a client of mine who came to me with that original postpartum plan and said to me, hey, I'm thinking about not having visitors for a week. I don't want anybody after the hospital. And I also don't want to share pictures out. I would definitely have keyed in on that and have dug into that one in particular to see what is going on there. Typically, some of these boundaries come from a place where there's a fear or a concern or some sort of past experience that is influencing a decision here. So I'd be interested to know, was it that she's trying to prevent somebody from knowing about the baby? Does she have somebody in her social network that maybe likes to overshare on social media and she doesn't want pictures going out? And I might dig into that a bit, because the interesting thing with this scenario is that she's allowing the pictures after a week, which means that it's not necessarily that somebody is going to put pictures of her baby on the internet, or that, and then since she's sharing the birth details, it's not necessarily that somebody would be getting information that she's had a baby. It seems to be control early on around who has access to the images of the baby. So I would have definitely dug in with this new mom to try and understand what the issue is. And then if it made sense that this was an appropriate response to her concern and that she felt comfortable that this was a clear boundary she wanted to set, the goal would then be to figure out how to message this appropriately to the family so that they're not feeling offended or pushback, that they're not seeing something that from their perspective would be common and expected as far as seeing new baby pictures. Again, the big thing to hit with the mom is that you have control over the images that you send, who you send those to. Of course, once they get out to those people, you can't prevent them from necessarily sharing out beyond that, but that we want to make sure that the concern that you have is real, that the boundary that you have is reasonable, that you're communicating it appropriately, that it's resolving or addressing the issue that you have, and that it's not creating a situation of unnecessary conflict that's going to just add stress to your situation when you're a new mom. Because I could see that definitely happening where maybe after baby is born, mom just becomes a bit annoying around, can I see a picture? Can I see a picture? Can I see a picture? And suddenly your first week experience is trying to manage mom constantly asking for a picture, which could have been avoided. So I definitely understand where the family is coming from as far as this being an unusual request. And again, it's not necessarily a wrong request, but it's definitely something that you'd want to understand, think through, and message appropriately before you share with your family. And then if you decide later that maybe this isn't right, her concern as far as I want to make sure that my mom understands it's not me backpedaling because she was annoying about it. Uh, making sure that she's able to language that in an appropriate way. So let's talk about the 1 week period. This is pretty common. I see this a lot with especially first time parents where they feel that the best thing for them would be to just have that period early on to get comfortable with new baby and new parenthood. And I think a lot of this comes from two big concerns in our culture today. The first concern is that we don't have a good social setup for visitor etiquette today. In traditional cultures and societies, it is not normal for new parents to essentially become cloistered for a sitting in period. Typically what you see is a lot of social support from the female members of the family. So mother-in-law, sisters, aunts, all these individuals coming to the aid to help and support the new family, especially the new mother. And I think that's the big difference. A lot of our culture today, when we think of seeing or visiting a new family or new parent, we are thinking about seeing the baby, and the focus is on the baby. So grandma comes over and maybe she expects to be entertained, or maybe she just expects to be handed a baby. And what we get are these uncomfortable situations where maybe baby is rooting or expressing concern, where like expressing a hunger signal, and now mom is uncomfortable. Mom is feeling like, give me the baby back, and grandma wants to hold the baby and is not giving the baby back, and then everything becomes uncomfortable. So I think there's a lot of trying to avoid that, where new moms want that period of time to just bond with their baby, to not have to worry about handing it off to somebody, to not have to worry about trying to claim the baby back, to not have to worry about entertaining anybody or having a guest there who is going to make rude comments about the house or their state or the fact they haven't showered or the fact that there's a mess or whatever it is. And I think some of this could be alleviated from the perspective of the family if they want to see the family and they want to be part of that those early days, is to acknowledge that your role in those early days is not a baby cuddler. It is a supporter of the new parent. So whether it's your son or your daughter that has just become a new parent, your job is to help support them by bringing them food, coming and cleaning, doing their laundry, because I imagine that if that was the role that you took, the role of service, that your child is going to welcome you open arms to come into that early space. So it's got to be an open understanding, ready to see raw and ready to just get your boots on and go to work to take care of your children, or your family members, so that they feel that they have the support, that they can welcome you in those early days. And I think that would benefit new families more so than what we have today as a culture. So the second one then is that there is a lot of insecurity, I think, around unwanted advice. So I hear this a lot where they don't want to invite new people over because they feel like they're just learning how to take care of a baby. And they don't necessarily want to welcome in a bunch of people who have opinions about how to take care of a baby, like their parents or their sister and brother or whoever who might have already had children. They're concerned about getting unsolicited advice, about being told what they're doing is wrong. They don't want to hear like, oh, try burping them this way, or have you tried this for the nap, or like you're holding them wrong, or you're doing this wrong, or you're using that kind of pacifier. I mean, there's 100 different things that somebody could mention casually trying to help, but in turn offending or making the new parent feel a little insecure. So again, to avoid this, the parents are saying, let's give me at least a week to get my bearing and make sure I'm comfortable with the baby and I know what I'm doing and I'm confident, a little more confident before I invite in some of that potential unsolicited advice. And again, I think that this is also the result of some of our modern culture, whereas you have groups or traditional peoples, if you think in America, maybe someone like the Amish, where the difference between parenting a child, between a grandmother parenting her children and the new children parenting their children, you know, the differences would be smaller in an Amish community than they are today. A lot of the things that our parents might have done now might go against medical advice or common advice from professionals. We get a lot of our information as far as parenting not from the intergenerational transfer of knowledge, but from experts and our peers. And that just is culturally built into us right from the beginning when we're getting socialized more from our peer groups than our hierarchical, intergenerational groups. So you see a lot of that where we're getting our information, our advice from influencers, from professionals, from researchers, different kind of child experts. We're looking to those sources, whereas historically speaking, you would have gone intergenerationally and asked your mother for advice. And what this creates is it creates a situation where, again, the natural, I think, inclination of a mother is to share with her child, to help and give advice and guide. And unfortunately, when that's the grandma giving advice to her child who's now a new mother, that advice may not be wanted. And that natural inclination to share may come across as outdated, potentially unwanted, and then what that might create is tension there, where the mother or the grandmother now feels judged, they feel unvalued, and bad feelings are a result. So I think some of this is just the result of a modern construct that we've created that is not necessarily the natural way of things. And it needs to be managed and mitigated. And a lot of that is just communication, setting appropriate boundaries, and being able to feel confident in your decisions and your instincts, and being able to maybe handle with some tact some unsolicited advice. So that kind of covers this issue, I think. If this was a client of mine, what I would have wanted to do when we were working on her postpartum plan is to understand what her concerns are into her postpartum, what she has fears about, what she wants, what her concerns are as it pertains to her own abilities, to her family, to any issues with her spouse. Let's talk about what her goals are. Let's make sure we understand what she needs to feel supportive and how she can communicate that out. And I think it's perfectly reasonable for her to set up this type of boundary. And I think it's great that she's communicated it early to her family. Now, maybe we could work on how that got communicated to improve some of maybe the conflicts, but all the same, I love seeing somebody who has a postpartum plan in the first place, because a lot of people don't. And it's wonderful to see that somebody is at least thinking about that in this post. So good on you, our Prego Princess 13. You are not the a-hole. I think it's reasonable to have boundaries, but let's think about how we communicate those, and let's make sure that they're appropriate. So that would be what I would advise, and that's how I would answer this Am I the A-hole postpartum edition. I hope you've enjoyed and gotten something out of it. Yeah, have a good one.